Well, for the first time since 1991 and sixth time in NHL history, we have a playoff Battle of Alberta as Edmonton and Calgary are set to meet in the second round of the Stanley Cup Playoffs. I'm pleased to be joined by Jack Michaels and Bob Stauffer. This is the panel presented by Sportsnet. And Jack, it's a star-studded affair. 4 of the top 8 point scorers from the NHL's regular season meeting in this series, and it was seemingly the best players on each team coming through in Game 7.
Well, that's true. I mean, Johnny Gaudreau put to rest any lingering playoff demons he might have had. He was not amongst Calgary's best players when they were last kind of seen as a cup favorite, you know, the 50-win team that was backstopped by Mike Smith in 2019. Mike Smith, on that particular occasion, was Calgary's best player. But Johnny Gaudreau, in the clutch, comes through with a Game 7 overtime winner and rewards a Calgary club that, very much like Edmonton in Game 7, deserved its victory. They outplayed Dallas, historically speaking. And quite frankly, when you put up 67 shots on the other team's netminder, that guy is going to get a lot of attention in Jake Ottinger. But what shouldn't be lost in that Game 7 Calgary victory was how well the Flames played lines 1 through 4, much the way Edmonton got some positive minutes out of Jesse Puljujarvi and Zach Kassian in their Game 7 victory. Calgary's fourth line gave them a real good shift in overtime and built momentum line upon line that we saw the Flames carry throughout that series of Dallas. So it's a formidable opponent, and yes, there's star power involved, but even if there wasn't, even if there was no one in the top 50, this would be a major event in this city, in this province, and quite frankly, the National Hockey League is going to be reminded once again what it means when these two teams get together.
You know, the series between Edmonton and Los Angeles, for me, it switched when the Oilers switched back. Out of necessity because of the Darnell Nurse suspension, 2-11-7 for game number 6, and then stayed with that in game 7. The tandem that was deployed with Evander Kane and Zach Hyman rotating through centers, and the fact that Leon Draisaitl had to basically play primarily left wing after suffering a lower body injury after a real greasy play for Mikey Anderson. That changed the kind of the scope of the series for me. I think that the Oilers got some pretty favorable matchups in the final 2 games. They ended up outshooting a team, Los Angeles, that outshoots everybody. And obviously a dominant Edmonton closed out in style. And they were led, as you guys briefly alluded to, by the Oilers' top players, and specifically the world's best player. We saw Connor McDavid really in the third period of Game 5 to force the overtime, and then in Game 6 and Game 7 get to a level that I'm not sure in both ends of the ice, with all due respect to Connor's greatness, that we've seen yet. Like, he just elevated and literally willed, and the Oilers had a lot of real good structure and process in their game. They had a lot of support, Jack mentioned, from, like Puljujarvi and Cassie and Archibald were hurting, but still got a score. Connor was in on the final 5 of 6 goals. It was a special performance, so fans should be stoked. It's going to be a really interesting series. There's some things about Calgary that concern me a bit. Calgary probably is going to be considered the favorite by many, but Edmonton is well within their grasp to go and get a series victory here.
What concerns you about Calgary, Bob?
They are good in goal. Jacob Markstrom's a good goalie, so let's start there. They had depth in scoring this year. That said, 5v5 scoring, they had one line. They're the best line in the league this year, with Gaudreau up front, along with Lindholm, who's played very well against Edmonton, historically speaking. And then Matthew Tkachuk, who I think will be better against Edmonton than he was against Dallas. So that line's good. And then they're heavy, and they're tough, and they're physical. However, we'll see what's up with Tanev on the back end. I don't think Calgary's defense, all due respect, was as good as Dallas's top 4, especially if Tanev is out of the lineup. If he couldn't play in Game 7, you have to think that he's at least questionable to start the series. But Calgary is a much deeper team to the Los Angeles. Los Angeles did not have Drew Doughty, nor did they have Victor Arvidsson. And I, with all due respect at this stage in his career to Jonathan Quick, I think Markstrom's a better goalie. So this is going to be a tough series for the Oilers. But Edmonton started to build a little bit of resolve in their team as well, and they should have belief in what they might be able to do.
Jack, Bob talked about Jacob Markstrom, and of course on the other end it's going to be Mike Smith. And after a gaffe in Game 1, and he owned up to it, he delivered in this series against LA with 2 shutouts, especially one in Game 7. So the Oilers, obviously, their success rides a lot on goaltender Mike Smith as well.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I'm not sure Jacob Markstrom, you'd say, played better than Mike Smith in the first round. Mike Smith played to a save percentage of 94. He had a couple of shutouts, and he was very much the difference. I'd concede that Jacob Markstrom had a better regular season than Jonathan Quick, but I still think it showed Edmonton's resolve to overcome a tremendous performance by Quick in Game 7, because Bob's exactly right. Forget the blowout wins in Games 2 and 3. The Oilers played their 2 best games of the season with the season on the line in Games 6 and 7. I don't want to hear about margin of victory or domination or anything like that. They played their best hockey in 6 and 7. That's a level that Edmonton has reached now, and I think has to be the new standard moving forward in this series, because Bob's exactly right. Calgary's going to throw everything it can at Edmonton, and they're going to throw the best line in the league, which happens to have 3 40-goal scorers on that. You don't see that in today's NHL, ever. And that's the kind of production they got out of that line. Now, having said that, I think Edmonton matches up well with Calgary for this reason, is because, again, when it comes to the elite of the elite, and this is where Colorado, I think, cancels out Edmonton to some degree. When it comes to the elite finish, Edmonton has the absolute elite. That's no disrespect to Johnny Gaudreau, Matthew Tkachuk. They're coming off tremendous series. But I think the Oilers still, when you roll out a lineup that includes 2 of the world's best 5 players, that's still an edge that you're going to have. At this point, I don't see Markstrom having a significant edge over Mike Smith. At this point, even if Chris Tanev is unable to go, I don't see Edmonton's defense as having a significant edge over Calgary's. Where I see the edge in this series is what Bob talked about. Connor McDavid, the world's best player, is coming off arguably the best 7 periods he's ever played in his career.
There is one more thing, and it was borne out during the course of the regular season, and frankly, it was borne out in the Dallas-Calgary series. Dallas's power play lost momentum for them at critical times during the course. They won 3 games. If their power play had been better, they would have won that series, because there were moments where, they were up 1-0 in a game and didn't
not having Hintz hurt too.
Yeah, in game 7 last night. Yeah. But Dallas's power play is not Edmonton's power play, no. And the Oilers' power play gashed the Flames in the regular season. So I think they were over 45% in the regular season against Calgary on the power play. Edmonton's got a good power play, even with Leon Draisaitl literally willing himself to playing. He's still Leon Draisaitl, and the Oilers' power play is still a power play. And that is the one thing that can mitigate against Calgary's maybe physicality advantage. I know Jay wants the team to be collectively, tough. I would say with the Flames, I wouldn't go out of my way looking to get in scrums. Let them do that stuff. See if you can end up getting a bonus power play once in a while out of it.
And then make them pay.
And make them play it that way.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun time indeed. You talked about the regular season. The season series was split 2-2 in 4 games, with Calgary scoring 17 times, Edmonton scoring 16 times. Can't wait to see the action on the ice. I can't wait to see what Ice District Plaza is like, because this place was rocking in Game 7. You can only imagine it's only going to be heightened in the second
Bob looked
round.
like you 31 years ago. He was a young pop.
I wasn't even born in 91.
I only had one shin back then. Still love Esa Tikkanen to this day.
Esa Tikkanen scored the winner in Game 7 against Mike Vernon and the Calgary Flames. For Jack and Bob, I'm Tony Brar signing off on The Panel, presented by Sportsnet.